Hello, everyone. I am coming to you from my aunt's cabin in New Hampshire, just like last year. So, totally different scenery here behind me. My guest today is Deborah Kevin, who is a hybrid boutique publisher who lives actually really near me in Baltimore, which is neat. Total coincidence. And I am really looking forward to having her tell us more about the publishing process because it can be so overwhelming to figure out what your options are when it comes to publishing a book. Welcome, Deborah.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Carolyn.
We're
Thank
going to
you
have a
for
good
having
time.
me.
I would love for you to start by telling us about how you got here. When did you become a publisher?
It's such a winding road story, like many entrepreneurial stories. I went to college right after high school, but I put myself through college. I ran out of money. And so I worked for 8 years, saving money to go back to school. And during that time, I was actually learning to be a teacher. I wanted to work with children on the autism spectrum. And at that time in the early 80s, teachers couldn't get jobs. There were too many teachers, and all of my friends who were graduating college as teachers were working at Macy's. And because I was on my own, I was like, I can't afford to have all these student loans and also, be working an hourly job. So I took an accounting class, and suddenly, like, the world opened up. I'm like, this makes sense to me. I'm a Libra. I like the things balance. So I went on to become a CPA, and I worked in the CPA world for many years, both in public accounting firms, some of the big six firms back in the day, and then also internal audit. And during that time, I was always the person people would come to and say, hey, can you make this sound better? Would you help me create a slide deck that isn't going to put people to sleep? Can you coach me on X, Y, or Z? So I was doing all of the things, all the while being an avid reader. Um, but it never occurred to me that I could do this and play with books all day until my youngest son, who ironically was diagnosed with autism in 2010. I left the corporate world and I'm like, now what am I going to do? Right. I had never not worked. Um, and I went back to school. I went to Stanford University to learn how to write and publish novels traditionally. But I did that for 2 years and then went on later, once I realized I wanted to publish books as well as write them. I went to Western Colorado University to get my master's. And here we are.
Wow, that is really cool. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so you publish not just your own books, but other people's books. Like you're an actual publisher, unlike me, where I'm like, I'm a publisher because I publish all my books.
Well, you're what we call in the biz an independent publisher, and which is a shift from the phrase self publishing, because back in the early days of self publishing, when Create Space was brand new, all of those frustrated authors who tried to get their books published traditionally suddenly had an avenue to do so. And unfortunately, they often published their shitty first drafts and slapped a cover on them, and they did themselves a great injustice. And so the term self-publishing became very pejorative in the industry. Traditional publishers looking down, people like, oh, if this is self-published, it can't be good, which is in fact not a truth. I'm a big fan of books being self-published. I think that they can be great because the author then retains everything. Um, and so the there's like the three main buckets, right? There's self-publishing, like what you did, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually really a smart choice as long as it's a mindful choice, and then some key elements are
You have to be prepared to be taking care of editing and cover design and
right.
formatting, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it.
There's a lot that goes into publishing. I say that writing is just one of the five major steps. The second is editing, as you mentioned. The third is publishing, which is the physical act of publishing a book. The fourth is launching your book. which I know you're an expert at. And then there's the ongoing marketing, which you're also an expert at. So those last two pieces are where a lot of authors fall down because they don't know how to consistently market their books and allow them to do the work that they intended them to do. And
Mhm.
so, we think oftentimes in the publishing world, what I see is people think it's like the field of dreams. If you write it, they will come. And that's not a truth.
Such a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, I interrupted you. You were talking about the three main buckets. So we have
Oh, yes.
indie or independent publishing. What are the other two?
So the other two, of course, most people think of the traditional publishing model, which has not changed in about 150 years, with the exception of the introduction of digital and audiobooks, which traditional publishers accepted quite reluctantly. But the process of traditional publishing has not changed in 150 years. And then there's this wild west between independent publishing and traditional publishing, which is hybrid. And there's anything in this area, I call it the Wild West because you can get anything from a vanity press, which is you give them your stuff, they slap a cover on it, they may do some editing, they may not, but they
Usually
give you
not.
back a published book. They're going to publish anything they get to. And then you have everything that operates up at the other end, similar to a traditional publisher, where you get royalties. You may or may not get advances, but the books are much more selectively picked to be published. It's not an automatic yes. Usually in the hybrid space, there's an author contribution and then the editor. So there's all different things in each of those buckets that are beneficial to all authors as long as they know which one is best for the goals that they have for themselves.
Mm, yeah. And to do the research to know what you're getting. If you're hiring a hybrid publisher and you're expecting that it is a traditional publisher, then you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, you really want to ask
Really,
and really, ask for the publishing contract if they're offering you a publishing deal. Ask always to see the contract before you sign it so that you can really take it to your own attorney and have them look at it and say, here's what these things mean. And make sure that that the contract is really author centric and or balanced and fair between the author and the publisher.
Mhm. Are there key questions that you think people need to ask when they are considering a publisher?
Of course. So the first is, what is your publishing goal? I've known people who really felt that unless they were, getting a New York Times bestseller, that they wouldn't be taken seriously and they wouldn't take themselves seriously. And I think that that's all mindset. Though
Mm,
there are benefits to a traditional publisher. The thing about the traditional space is you need to recognize that first you have to convince an agent that your book is publishable and that they believe that they can license your book to a bigger publisher. And they're going to leverage their relationships. But always keep in mind that that agent is not working for you. They're actually working for the publishers because those are the relationships that pay their fees. It's what puts bread on their table. And although they've signed you and you have a contractual agreement, always understand that they are actually working on behalf of the publishers.
that's a really
So
good point.
really get really clear about what your publishing goals are. If control and controlling all of aspects of the publishing process is important to you, then you probably want to go to a more independent publishing experience. Whereas if you're looking more for a collaborative experience, you would consider a hybrid. So it really depends on, first of all, your goals. There's no wrong way. It's really just what's going to serve you. Understand this, regardless of how you publish, the primary marketing is going to always fall to the author.
Mm,
Now, in the olden days, 150, 70 years ago, traditional publishers would do all that heavy lifting. They would invest, they would put all the marketing out there, they would arrange book tours, do all of the things. But that's not the case anymore. And they're definitely not going to do that with a new author. They're going
Yeah,
to wait and
they're
see.
doing that with just 1 or 2 books a year that they really believe is gonna give them a huge return on investment.
Exactly. And one of the interesting things, there was this past year, there was a lawsuit that the US government filed against Penguin Random House, an antitrust lawsuit to
Mm,
stop the
they're getting too
acquisition
big.
of Simon and Schuster. It's a big deal. And so there were all this testimony, but the most shocking piece of information to come out of that was that Penguin Random House and Simon Schuster actually admitted that most of their books sell less than 250 copies. And when I heard that, I was like, suddenly we kick butt because we do
Yeah.
that. That would be, for what I would consider our launch, would be on the very low side.
Yeah, and you hear that stat about self-publishers that they sell 200 copies of their book, and so it's like, "Oh, actually, it's on par."
You're very, and
Actually.
there's nothing wrong with that. So let's talk for a moment about, self-publishing or independent publishing, right? So how do you find out, Carolyn, when you're looking for a new book, how do you find out about a book that you might read?
I look at the also bots on Amazon for my favorite authors. I don't know if
Okay.
that's how most people do it, but I have authors that write in a small niche of romance that I enjoy, and so I will go to the sales page of my favorite books and look and see what other authors and books get recommended to me on that page on Amazon.
I love that. And so that's a really important thing that we'll circle back around. Don't let me forget. Most people find out about books in that these are the top three ways: a family recommendation, a friend recommendation, and the third is their favorite authors. They
Mm,
automatically go back to their favorite authors. So as an author, what you want to keep an eye on is, how do you make raving fans? Because if you have raving fans, and the number that's being tossed around is about 1,000 who aren't related to you, right? 1,000 readers who will anxiously await your next book and buy anything that you publish. That's really what you want to get to as an independent, really anyone. But you asked about what kinds of questions people should ask. And I think one question is, what kind of marketing support are you going to give me?
mm.
How much control will I have over my cover design? What's the royalty split? And so let's talk about that for a moment. A royalty split when you're an independently published author is zero. Like, you get 100% of the reward and 100% of the risk. If you're going to go traditional, you're going to get between 8 and 10% of the gross sales that you're going to split then with your agent. So you want to know what that agent percentage is as well, because they're going to get a percentage of your advance if you get one, and they're going to get a percentage of your royalties if you start to earn them. And then
And that advance is not like free money. That's you have to pay that back from your royalties, right?
well, let me clarify. Yes and no. So if you are working with a traditional publisher and they give you an advance, as a first time author, likely it's going to be small. So how that advance is calculated is, they look at your book, they look at the quality, they look at how other books in that genre have done for them in the past, and they estimate what that first year of sales will be. And then they calculate the probability of you hitting that mark, and that's what your advance is based upon. So
Mm.
your advance gets paid to you through your agent. Your agent takes his or her cut. You get the remainder. If you don't, what's called, earn out those royalties, say that they miscalculated and you never even approach that number, you don't have to pay it back. So
But like you don't start earning royalties until your
you hit
royalties
that
are matched
threshold. Yes.
negotiated.
So if it's a $2,000 threshold, you have to hit $2,000 in royalties before you'll start to get your royalties again. So that's an advance. So yeah, that advance is technically called an advance against future royalties. The other thing that traditional publishers do is they allow returns. And so the process of ordering books, I'm going to pick on Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble, because it's pretty much everywhere,
The only
whether
one
it's in the UK, it's Waterstones, and if it's in Canada, it's Indigo, same company. Um, they see your book in an advanced catalog. They're like, we have people who love this kind of book. We're going to order 3,000 copies. So they order 3,000 copies. They get printed, they get shipped, they get stored. Then they get distributed out to the Barnes and Nobles who have ordered them, and they sit on the shelf. Now, if they don't turn, they don't sell, they get what's called pulped. They get returned to the publisher. So picture this. You've got your nice little advance. You may be earning a little bit of royalties because you've met that advance. You've done a great job marketing yourself and getting out there and booking your own book tours. You're getting this money, it's coming in. And then 6 months later, you get a bill from the publisher that are all these books that have gotten returned. Completely outside of your control, completely outside of anything that you can, but you get this money can get, and they usually just pull it right out of your bank account, just so you know. So returns are a big deal because traditional publishing process and the traditional model is antiquated. And so all these books just sit and molder. And if they don't get sold, they get destroyed. So self-publishing and independent publishing, or self-publishing independent, same, or hybrid, typically uses what's called a print on demand model, which is this: nothing gets printed until it's ordered and paid for. So it's much more sustainable. It's better for the environment. There's no storage fees, there's no shipping costs. It's all included. And the other thing is, if somebody in Barcelona orders your book, they can have it sent to a printer that's close by and print it there and ship it directly. So it's not a centralized printing. It's actually this whole distributed printing that is done near where the purchaser lives.
And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about whether print on demand books can be ordered by bookstores and libraries. Can they end up on shelves?
Yes, they can. But here's how they won't. So a lot of independent publishers make the mistake of going narrow. They only make their book available on Amazon. They may put it in Amazon Unlimited, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's going deep. So bookstores and libraries do not purchase books from Amazon. But it's easy to just take the same files with a little tweak to the cover and go to Ingram Spark, which is a printer distributor that's global. All of the big publishers use it. You, as an independent author, can use it. I use it as a hybrid publisher, and you upload it there. That makes it available for purchase at any bookstore in the world. You can also put your books digitally anywhere in the world using a process through draft to digital, which gets it into libraries digitally. It can get it into Nooks and iBooks and all the different variations. There are hundreds of them across the world. So it can make it available however people consume your book.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's called going wide. Yeah.
The bookstores are not going to randomly order your book, but you can, go to a bookstore and say, I'm a local author. Can I do an event and have them order some copies? If you sell those copies, they're more likely to start stocking it.
Absolutely. So what you can do in that regard, so say I know you're an independently published author, Carolyn. So what you can do is a lot of publishers don't want to take a chance. A lot of local bookstores don't necessarily want to take a chance because remember, they're stuck in this old way where I've got to order a ton of books and then I have the risk of having to return those books. So what can happen instead is you could actually create like an Eventbrite event where you have people purchase tickets to the event. That purchase price includes the book. Then the bookstore is already whole. There's no risk to them. They'll order those books because they're already prepaid. And guess what? you can have a very successful event. And then they're going to be like, oh, let us keep a copy as well to have on our bookshelves, 1 or 2 copies that you can autograph.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're there. It's a first edition autographed by the author.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So why don't you tell us what makes your hybrid publisher, Highlander Press, unique? What is it that's special that you do?
Well, if you remember, I said that I was a CPA and I was also a Six Sigma black belt, which is all about process. And so I bring all of those skills to the publishing, writing, editing, publishing, launching, promoting process. I looked at it as a whole. But the other thing is we approach our business very differently. Our business model is we're very flat. We have only me plus a book shepherd on staff. And the book shepherd is actually a group of people that do certain things for us. They shepherd our books through the process. Um, and we only work with women owned businesses. So, for example, if we're working on a cover design, I'm going to reach out to a group of cover designers that I've vetted that we've worked with before, but they're all women owned businesses. So, we're in the process of pulling in all of the skill sets that we need for the writing, editing, launching, book publishing, celebrating, marketing process. And we're going to raise everybody up by giving all the other businesses a chance to rise as well. So that's really important to me, is that we help other women owned businesses grow as
Awesome.
we grow. So that's one commitment that makes us very different. The second is I'm very committed to teaching people how to be authors. And I'm
Mm.
not talking necessarily about the writing piece of it, though I do that as well. I'm talking about, as you have books that are published, you have intellectual property that you own, you now have a literary estate that is separate from your other, estate that you can actually leave to people that
Mm.
can then continue on, your legacy and decide how your books are made available to the public. But we talk about all the things that we've kind of hit on today. Like, what do you want your cover to look like? How do you do that? And there's a series of classes that our authors all go through about half a year, once a week. I teach some, I bring in other experts to talk about, what you think about a cover. Here's how we're going to do your book launch. Here's how you can leverage your book to get speaking gigs. Like, we're looking at the author as a business model and teaching people about that author
I
platform,
really wish that that had been a part of my master's degree in professional creative writing because it was
right?
not at all.
Well, and it's funny because I went to Stanford and I took novel writing. Like, I have written 2 novels completely. I've written several nonfiction. I've published, I don't know how many essays in other books. They don't teach you about publishing. They don't teach you about how to get an agent. They don't teach you any of that stuff. It's like,
None of the
great. And
business
then
side.
now what? Yeah. So that's where we're different. I'm really big into the now what. The other thing that I also do is, for every book that we license, I make a loan to kiva.org for another women owned business across the world. And so we fund other women who are growing their businesses to feed their families across the world. So I'm really invested in giving women a voice, and a few good men. I mean, I don't have anything against men.
You have to
I really don't. I'm married to a wonderful man, and I have 2 sons. I love men, but this is really about allowing women to claim their expertise and own their process, and to do it in a way that feels integrous to them and also makes the impact that we want our books to make in the world.
Mm. All right. Are there any other things that we have not covered today that you think is very important to know?
Oh my gosh, there's so many different things.
Oh, I was supposed to remind you to talk about also bots
Also bots.
on the Amazon page. Looking at
Also bots. Yeah. So let's talk
not
about
real bots, but
Amazon. Let's talk about Amazon a little bit. So Amazon is the world's largest distributor of any products in the world. They started with books, but it's the largest distributor. They're actually enormous and they're available all over the world. It would be a huge disservice to not publish on Amazon, but it can also be a huge disservice to publish only on Amazon. My number one thing I say to everybody, regardless of how you're publishing, is make sure that you're buying your own ISBNs. And by you, I mean you if you're self-publishing or independently publishing, you do that. Make sure that your publisher, like Highlander Press, we buy our ISBNs and then use them. We aren't using Amazon's free one,
Yeah,
right?
very important.
It's
And
hugely
ISBNs
important.
cost like $125, which is a lot, is annoying, but it's worth it. And
Well,
I
it's
really never know.
$125 per side. So if you're doing a print book, a hardback book, it's one ISBN. If you're doing a
Mhm.
paperback, it's another.
Right, yeah,
And you're doing digital, it's another. So, and if you're doing an audiobook, it's four. However, keep in mind that regardless of the platform, it's the same ISBN. So if I'm publishing something on Amazon and also on Ingram, it's one ISBN for the print, the paperback copy. So it's not, every platform and every kind. It's really just where are you going? So don't ever use the free ISBN. Make sure you own it because that just gives you a lot of options. So the also bots are actually why it's so important to get an Amazon bestseller, because you can spend a lot of money on Amazon ads. But if you remember what I said is the way people find books is friends and family, two ways, friends, family, and the authors that they already love. So if you can get your book in an Amazon bestseller status, Amazon then starts doing the heavy lifting and it shows up in the also bots because your book is related in some way to something that other people have purchased. So it's a way to discover new authors. It's a way to see what else is out there. But the also bots is not a paid thing. It is actually you earn it and
yeah,
you
we
earn
don't
it.
have control over that.
Yeah. Yeah, you have no control over it, but it's a great feature of Amazon, which is why for all publications, we want to make sure we get an Amazon bestseller. And the other thing, let's talk about Kindle
Unlimited.
Unlimited. So Kindle Unlimited is what's called going narrow. And so if you have a nonfiction book or a children's book, don't use Kindle Unlimited. I see it all the time, and it is such a rookie mistake. Don't do that. Kindle Unlimited is a subscription model for people who are avid readers. So I know, Carolyn, you are a romance author. Romance books and readers read like they're eating candy. It's great for you to have your book in Amazon or Kindle Unlimited, because if you have a readership, people are going to read, and you can choose whether you get paid when they check the book out. You can get paid by the page. You can get paid in a number of different ways. They're going to be micropayments.
I switched recently. I switched from wide to narrow because I realized that I didn't have the time and energy to be marketing the wide. So I was like, it's just sitting there not doing much. Let me test out this unlimited thing. And yeah, getting paid for the amount of views, like pages read, has
Yeah.
been pretty sweet.
Yeah, it can be really sweet, and especially for someone who, if you churn books out quickly, like romance books are out, and you just keep growing your backlist, it's really a great way for people to discover you. It's a low risk for them. And then when they love you, they're going to tell their friends and family. And guess what? They can go to Kindle Unlimited. And the beautiful thing about it is you're not tied to it for forever. So as long as you have it published elsewhere and you have unpublished it someplace else, you can always turn off Kindle Unlimited and then go wide eventually.
Yeah, it's like 3 months commitment periods, I
Yeah.
believe.
You just have to remember to turn it off before you do the other. Otherwise, you'll get into Amazon jail.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's such a good point about who should be choosing Kindle Unlimited. That it makes sense for romance authors, probably mystery thrillers,
Sci-fi, fantasy,
things where
military
people are
fantasy.
really voracious,
Yeah.
but not for nonfiction and children's.
Yeah, it really makes no sense. It's like, it's really just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
because that's not how we typically consume those books. Yeah. So yeah, that's a really big deal. And it's interesting because we do, for when we're looking at how do we determine what categories to put a book in, what keywords might people type when they're searching for the book that we're publishing, and then what other books are in this genre category and how well did they do? How many reviews do they have? We do this whole comparable book process, and it's so heartbreaking the number of books, like children's books, nonfiction, who when we're doing that comparison, we see them in, they've gone on to, and it's like such a bad, it's not good for the author,
Yeah.
ultimately. So it's kind of heartbreaking.
I want to circle back to something else that you said about the traditional publishers saying that they're selling about 250 copies of most books.
Sure.
And you said for us, that would be really on the low end. So I would love to know what a successful launch looks like for one of your books. What do you kind of anticipate and expect? Not that, people, this is not a guarantee, but
Right.
I know that you work with Suzanne Fregenza with launching, and she believes in a full price launch, not free, not 99 cents.
No, that actually that's funny. Because she used to do the 99-cent launch, and I'm like, we're not doing that. People are putting their hard-earned energy in. This is worth investing in. So a successful launch it's dependent upon the categories that we pick. And so this is the number one thing that most people don't understand. If, as a publisher, I've done a great job in selecting your categories and keywords, which is part science and part intuition, you'll sell the fewest number of books to get an Amazon bestseller. If I've done my job right, you could sell 10 books and be an Amazon bestseller. So I'm not focused necessarily on the number of books that's being sold for launch day, even though, of course, we want to sell as many books as possible because that's when most people are going to discover and purchase your book. But we're really focused on how do we make it the fewest number of books to get that Amazon bestseller, because then it becomes an also bought. It goes on all their lists and you can see it time and again. If someone like goes to a marketing category and wants to look for a marketing book, if you're in the top 40, you're going to show up as long as you remain there. So that's one thing. The other is we typically sell, and again, it depends upon the author. It depends upon their network. It depends upon a whole lot of factors and how visible they're being on launch day and beyond, and how much they've built up their following. So we could sell anywhere from 300, 500, 700, 1,000, 1,500 books in a day.
Woo.
Really depends on, that collaboration. We've had authors, we've had really great success. We've only had one book in all the years we've been doing this that wasn't an Amazon bestseller. And it was because the author didn't have a platform. He wasn't on social media at all. And he really didn't want to be. And so he didn't put any effort into building up his social media presence before launch day. And so he was basically shouting into the wind. We gave him everything that we give all of our authors, but it was just and he was happy because it did for him what he wanted it to do. I wasn't happy because we didn't get an Amazon bestseller. And I can't guarantee it, but we have a great track record. We do work with Suzanne Tregenza more, and it's a very collaborative process that we do.
The kids have just returned from a trip to Keene.
I love it.
So I guess I better wrap up because
I love it.
But okay, I will be free to talk to you in a moment.
I love it.
Oh my goodness. Well, that is awesome. So I will ask you again if there are any other last thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up.
The last thought that I'll share is, if you have felt in your heart that you have a book or a story to share, whether it's your personal story, a memoir, a thought leader book, or a novel, do yourself a favor and just freaking write it, because saying you're going to write a book someday makes you a waiter and not a writer. And literally the only thing that makes you a writer is the act of writing. We all stink at the beginning. Our first drafts are always terrible. Don't convince yourself that you can't do something because you've never done it before. Writing is actually one of those things that you can get better with. So I challenge you, if you have a story that you want to tell, just get started and do it.
Fantastic. So we have the link to Highlander Press in the show notes caption description. Are there particular people that you would like to reach out? Do you just get on like a call with people and see where they're at in the process?
Yeah, so we actually have a submission process. So if someone has a book that they have written, they can go to our submissions page on our website and just follow the instructions and submit a book. They won't be submitting the whole book. They'll submit about 10 pages. They'll give us the summary. They'll give us a bio. There's some other questions. And then I always book a call with the author because I feel like I want to give positive feedback. What would work, what wouldn't. And then we just see, first of all, how do they receive the feedback? That's huge for me. And it's huge for them too, because they can see our editing style.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's a good fit, we may invite them to publish with us. If it's not a good fit, I will ask them what their goals are and then point them in the right direction.
Oh,
So I
that's
always do
great.
a free editorial read of 10 pages. And so that's the best way. And then if, that's what I would say. Like,
Awesome.
don't be afraid.
That's great. Yeah, I love that you can even help if it's not the right fit to point them in the right direction. So there's absolutely no reason not to go
Exactly.
and submit at Highlander Press. So
Yeah.
check
I
out
love
that link.
helping people get their stuff published, and whether it's with us or not, it's really kind of irrelevant. My bigger mission is to give women a voice. So
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. It's a delight to have you here, and I learned a lot. I think the audience learned a lot.
thank
So,
you. Well, it is my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
all right. I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.